It's just cheating. But what we can do now is communicate our way through this next matchup, as we have Rogov on the left-hand side of your screen, James Beck on the right-hand side of your screen, and both of these players are so accomplished. You know, Rogov did take a little bit of a break last season, did make it to the finals in San Antonio, but was a finalist at NAIC in 2023, top 4 at OCIC, and of course our Anaheim regional champion.
Yeah, amazing accomplishments there. Been a great player for a long time. Kind of one of those players who kind of expects to win every time he participates.
For sure. James Beck as well, 4 times regional champion, got top 4 at Worlds in 2022 and 2019, and won the Sao Paulo Latin American International Championships in 2020. And now that we've looked at the accomplishments, let's take a look at their teams. As Rogov, we haven't seen them on stream just yet, but what we have seen is a very similar team. This Terapagos with Calm Mind and Substitute alongside of Incineroar and Rillaboom, fake out support, protect the Terapagos, buy it time to set up.
That's one of the stock version of this Terapagos team, and kind of what we were expecting going in. Of course, I'm rooting for it because he has 4 of the Pokemon for my caster predictions. I think it's a lot of fun. I think Screamtails in general are really powerful, underplayed Pokemon, really strong in this format. We just see a decent amount of choice items, so I think that Disable is an interesting move. It could be a factor in this matchup in particular. And then I know that Cornerstone Ogerpon we've been talking about a little bit throughout the course of this weekend, likely to be a key player here to try to get attacks away from this Terapagos, who is going to have a bit of a challenge, I feel like, in this matchup staying on the field.
For sure. This team is slow, it's bulky, it wants to find time for Terapagos to shine. And unfortunately, when you look at James's team on the other side of the field, that Calyrex Shadow Rider, the Mienshao, the Urshifu, those are Pokemon who don't want to slow down. They want to go full throttle all the way to the finals.
Yeah, I feel like the adjustments that James has made kind of relative to the standard version of this team make this matchup more difficult for Rogov, where kind of a tough pull for him. 2 fighting type Pokemon, never what you want to see when you have a Terapagos as your primary and kind of like only your real attacker on the team. So I think that's going to be really key in this matchup. James going to keep at least one of those 2 Pokemon healthy, try and get a big fighting type attack down onto that Terapagos, and Rogov going to have to see if he can play the cat and mouse a little bit. Usually this is a team archetype on the Terapagos side where you want to leave it on the field and rotate the other slot. Might have to mix things up a little bit more in this game because James has a lot of great tools for exerting pressure onto that Terapagos.
What I find interesting as well is going to be that Mienshao. I know you and I spoke about it at the top of the show. Its inner focus ability means it cannot be flinched by fake out. And looking at how people like to play this Terapagos team, a lot of it is fake out turn 1, you turn parting shot turn 2, fake out turn 3, you turn parting shot turn 4. And Mienshao is just completely oblivious to all of that rotation, all of that flinching, and as a result should very easily be able to land those close combats.
Yeah. And even Taunt's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
Where they're kind of thinking about being more of an offensive Pokemon in this matchup. A lot of Pokemon that don't do a whole lot of damage on this team, so losing the options to use their supportive moves would weaken them also. I really like James's matchup here, so I'm excited to see how such a great player like Rogov tries to get around it.
And there's that Mienshao out in the lead with Calyrex Shadow Rider versus the Incineroar and the Terapagos for Rogov.
See Terapagos going up to his middle form here, and probably a little bit concerned as this matchup starts facing down the Shadow Rider Calyrex, which is kind of one of those Pokemon that use Terapagos to have an advantage against. But James's matchup is pretty teched against this Terapagos, and Mienshao already facing it down.
We spent a lot of time talking about the Mienshao already. One thing I want to call out about the Calyrex Shadow Rider is the fact that this variant has Nasty Plot and Psychic. So not only can it sort of match the setup phase that the Terapagos wants to do, it's a ghost type, can't be flinched, and then it can hit it for Psychic, which is going to be single target, not going to do as much damage as the same type attack boosted attack, but is still going to be very effective. And we get our first Terastallization on the Mienshao into a ghost type, which is typically used to dodge fake out, but in this case, I think it's to dodge a Terra Starstorm.
Yeah, a lot of fun there, right? Where it'll hit it after it Terastallizes if Terapagos chooses to do so, but for now, looking very safe.
Yeah, that Astral Barrage certainly isn't going to do any damage to the normal type Terapagos, but close combat into the Incineroar will be enough to pick up the KO after that little bit of chip damage the Astral Barrage did. And while Mienshao will take a couple of stat drops and a Rocky Helmet damage for its trouble, I think more importantly, it isn't going to take damage from Terra Starstorm.
Just as you say, what a great Terastallization there, getting an easy knockout. And the downside of that, I guess, is you get your Focus Sash broken. I don't think you're going to be too upset. Also leaves us in sort of a fun situation here where now if the Terrapagos were to terrestrialize, it would be a super effective in a way Terra Starstorm onto the terrestrialized Mienshao. However, it does have that wide guard, right? So now there's the mind game, or do you want to risk kind of going for everything there and potentially attacking into a wide guard? The advantage of that is at least the Calyrex isn't going to do a super great job of exploiting that. You know, Tropico's still going to be immune to that Astral Barrage, but as you said, with the nasty plot, there are some options there, and Mienshao's just going to flee battle for now and come back later.
Yeah, this Ogerpon is well suited to go on the attack as well, because even if we see another Astral Barrage here from that Calyrex, given that it's at full health and the sturdy ability is still activated, it will get the opportunity to attack. And Rogov did actually go for terrestrialization onto the Terrapagos, which means now Terra Starstorm will be a spread attack, but it will not be getting quote-unquote super effective damage against a terrestrialized Pokemon, that Mienshao, as Incineroar did come in its place. Astral Barrage will still move first. It is going to connect with the Ogerpon Cornerstone for a good amount of damage. And what I find very curious is just how much damage this Calyrex Shadow Rider is going to take, and will this be a KO? The Ivy Cudgel alone after Intimidate isn't enough, and now with the follow-up Terra Starstorm, it is nowhere near enough damage, as that Terrapagos hasn't had time to set up.
Yeah, this is basically why I stopped playing Terrapagos myself. Yeah, if you cannot get any boost, the Terra Starstorm damage is not great. At least it's spread, which is helpful, but especially the unrestricted Pokemon, it just takes so long to whittle them down. And now with this, the terrestrialization committed, one of the weaknesses is that you lose the Terra Shell ability, so whatever hits it now is going to deal full damage. And yeah, sort of a tricky spot here. The Rillaboom, we see getting hovered in the back there. Maybe it could help out a little bit, potentially help the damage of Ogerpon, but really tough spot for Ragava already.
Yeah, and the one thing that I find super interesting is that because this Terrapagos has gone on the offense and James has matched that offensive pace, James is stopping Rogov from going for that setup and really just limiting just what can be done at this point in time. Fake Out will even further limit the amount of damage Rogov can put down on the field, as it will flinch the opposing Terrapagos this turn. And while Astral Barrage isn't connecting with the Terrapagos, I don't think that matters at this point. James is doing a fantastic job of focusing down on everything but the Terrapagos, recognizing that it's just not in a position where it can do much for this battle.
Yeah, I don't hate this from like a trading perspective for Ragava. You're going to wind up healing most of this back. Maybe you fake out the Incineroar now, get another Terra Starstorm off, but you're not like picking up a knockout here, but at least getting some damage down after a really tough first couple of turns.
I almost feel like Rogov can't even pivot into going for Calm Mind at this point in time, because they're already so far behind in this matchup. Another Astral Barrage brings Rillaboom down to below half its health, and Rogov does take the risk to go for one Calm Mind, but is it too little too late?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you kind of have to here, right? Where it's going to take so many Terra Starstorms if you're unboosted, where at least this now, where you swing twice more and you're basically even on the amount of turns, where you just kind of end up with a boost for free. But Incineroar's still pretty healthy here, where I'm not certain that a combination of attacks from these two Pokemon is going to be able to knock the Incineroar out, and it getting to swing here could be a decent deal here. They're potentially knocking out this Rillaboom or troubling the Terrapagos.
It's also very interesting that James feels so comfortable going for Astral Barrage time and time again. Does miss out on the KO on the Rillaboom this turn, but here we go. Here's that +1 now. Terra Starstorm into both of James's Pokemon, but Calyrex is able to hold on with a sliver of health. The U-turn certainly will not pick up the KO on Incineroar, but does give Rogov the opportunity to pivot back into Ogerpon.
Yeah, I guess, there's some advantages there where Ogerpon now being threatened by Calyrex, but at least in that situation, you would be able to potentially pick up a double knockout. But instead at the party show, you're, not damaging the Terrapagos, but weakening its stats. And as we get closer and closer to a situation where the Terrapagos is going to be stuck on the field, pretty tough spot here. It doesn't have reduced special attack now, just sort of negates the offensive benefit of that Calm Mind, but more importantly, gets the Mienshao into the field for free. And now, what do you do about the potential of an Astral Barrage and then a close combat into the Terrapagos slot?
And not only that, I feel like James is doing a very good job of hiding his final Pokemon. If that is the Choice Scarf or Shifu Rapid Strike, at this point in time, I think it could just lock into maybe even a Surging Strikes and win.
Yeah, this is looking pretty tough for Ragava. Like we mentioned before the match, really tough-looking matchup, and James has played really well.
James has played incredibly well in this matchup, and while this Ogerpon Cornerstone will try to buy some time with a spiky shield, fake out into the Terapagos means that nothing much is really going to happen this turn. We're just going to let this fake out cycle through, get one more turn of grassy terrain recovery, and then we'll be right back where we were before.
Yeah, I mean, why not make that move, right? There's really no cost to James. You get a little bit of healing here, which is probably not going to make a big difference, but I think critically not going to heal the Ogerpon up enough that it's able to survive an Astral Barrage. So, now the spiky shield has been blown, unlikely to be able to protect that slot, so probably Calyrex gets to pick up a knockout, and again, Mienshao may get one also.
I am a little bit surprised we saw James go for the parting shot earlier with that Incineroar to get Mienshao back in. I was personally anticipating maybe a knockoff to remove the leftovers to just, again, sort of start whittling down these various options that Rogov has. But given that grassy terrain already is on a timer, maybe that just wasn't as important. Oh, here's Wide Guard from Mienshao, going to protect itself from a Terra Starstorm. So James, I think, doing exactly what you just called out, Scott, focusing on Terapagos' partner, knowing that there really isn't anything it can do in this board position. Calyrex Shadow Rider finally gets its first knockout of the match onto that Ogerpon and will get a special attack boost to boot.
Yeah, I mean, this is just so frustrating for the Terapagos player, where it's like, what are you really supposed to do? Does get the Calm Mind off there, making a great read to boost its stats instead of attacking into the Wide Guard. However, the threat of the Wide Guard remains, where still going to need to find a way to deal with this Mienshao in order to meaningfully get back into this game. The one thing that is great for Rogov there is the turn on which this Rillaboom is going to come into the battle. We'll get to at least reactivate this Grassy Surge to get the Grassy Terrain back out there and threaten a knockout onto this Calyrex with Grassy Glide. But with that Terastallation much earlier in the game, you're not going to be able to, I guess I couldn't have faked out the Mienshao anyway, so kind of just double stuck there. Yeah, and I'm kind of just looking at a situation where there's just so many ways that James can close this, especially assuming, as you mentioned before, that the last Pokemon is probably that Urshifu. Yeah,
one thing about Wide Guard to keep in mind is that unlike moves like Protect, you can keep utilizing Wide Guard again and again and again, and there really is no punishment for doing so. There's no decreased odds or chance of it failing or any of that stuff. So Grassy Glide into the Mienshao makes sense, as you want to stop that Pokemon from Wide Guarding so your Terra Starstorm can do something or anything in this matchup. Unfortunately, though, it only does about 50% damage to that Mienshao. Calyrex is able to pick up the KO on Rillaboom, and now it's 4v1.
Yeah, this is now a good game, right? Because this Terapagos' only attacking move is this Terra Starstorm. There's nothing preventing James now from just clicking Wide Guard until the end of the game, where Terapagos simply doesn't have anything it can do with Substitute Calm Mind and Protect as its other moves, and we see Rogov realizing this is checkmate and locking in the forfeit. So James with a decisive win in this first game.
I think decisive is exactly the word for it. James was on the offense turn one, and even though Rogov was able to sneak in a couple of Calm Minds here and there, ultimately just did not matter in the matchup. And going into game number two, thinking about how strong James started that game number one, I'm curious if there's any adjustments Rogov can make to try and buy that Terapagos more time.
Yeah, I'm curious too, because I personally don't really see one. This to me was exactly why Terapagos started falling out of the metagame after looking really strong at the beginning of the format the first time around. Because again, Calyrex is supposed to be why you're playing Terapagos, right? Where you have the type advantage against it. You can't be hit by its signature move. But these teams have started teching around Calyrex so well to be able to deal with this matchup. And when there's a bunch of Pokemon pressuring Terapagos all game, and that Wide Guard in particular is just so frustrating, there just isn't much else you can do. And this team from Rogov, it's so much fun to play because it's very methodical, but it is very much, it has its one win con and it needs to work toward it. And when that gets undermined by the opposing team composition, there aren't a whole lot of alternative paths to get through. It's not like the team we saw from Joe Ugarte, where Iron Hands can be the sweeper now. This team doesn't really have that secondary attacker. It's a bunch of support Pokemon.
So I do want to ask, when I look at Rogov's 6, that Screamtail with Encore and Disable seems like it would be a really interesting choice, especially if you're worried about Wide Guard forever. Do you think there's a reason why Rogov is leaving it on the bench?
Yeah, I mean, I think it certainly doesn't help with the offensive problem. But yeah, I mean, maybe you bring it, right? Where I feel like it's going to be very difficult if you do bring the Screamtail to kind of maneuver enough to actually make a difference. But what we saw the first game is probably not going to work, right? And maybe you just change things up. You try not to give Incineroar up so early. At least Screamtail would sort of help out as being a decent switch into the close combat if that were to happen again. But yeah, I'd like to see it just because I think there's a chance. But I think even with Screamtail, I think Rogov would just have to play absolutely out of his mind.
Well, if anybody can do it, Rogov, we've seen them play out of his mind so many times in the past. For now, though, we're starting things off in a very similar formation with that Rillaboom and the Terapagos in the lead for Rogov versus, once again, that combination of Mian Xiao and Calyrex Shadow Rider.
So I guess the advantage this time is at least it's more difficult to knock out Terapagos' partner Pokemon, and it also kind of leads us to a fun turn where we saw last time the Terapagos kind of just left alone to its own devices as the other Pokemon burned down. This time you go for the knockout Terapagos perhaps because Rillaboom is maybe less appealing of a target than Incineroar was. And then as Rogov, do you anticipate that maybe play differently yourself?
I mean, the option of Woodhammer plus grassy terrain is there right in front of the Calyrex Shadow Rider, and we get a Psychic from the Calyrex Shadow Rider to break the Terra Shell ability on this Terapagos. I think there's another attack coming. Close combat connects, and it picks up the KO. That is one restricted Pokemon down for Rogov early on, and certainly has an opportunity to trade here, but did he go for it? Here it comes, it's Woodhammer, but it's into that Mian Xiao. So we'll bring it down to the Focus Sash, but that Calyrex Shadow Rider now is absolutely free to start racking up those Astral Barrages. Yeah,
this is tough where, it's such an important Pokemon for this team going down on the first turn. And, while getting all that damage on the Mian Xiao is great, it's kind of done its job, right? Where the Pokemon it most needed to help deal with is gone already. Certainly you'd love to get another attack off of this Incineroar, maybe get another knockout, but I think that this is now a tricky endgame for Rogov. The positive is that Calyrex doesn't deal with Incineroar super well either, so maybe that's a Pokemon that you can get some damage in. Maybe try to pick up a knockout with this Rillaboom, but James is sort of an interesting spot now too. We didn't even get to see his last Pokemon, but again, expecting Mian Xiao to leave the battle, not give that easy knockout to Rillaboom, and I'll see the player position from here because this is a great spot for Incineroar to come in and intimidate both of these Pokemon.
Yeah, and I think Rogov making a huge prediction there in the move selection, either predicting that there was going to be a terastallization on that Calyrex Shadow Rider by targeting it with Fake Out, and unfortunately it was a Protect, but I think that's an okay outcome because at the end of the day, the Rillaboom is still able to get its attack through. It's a U-turn to negate the Intimidate, to switch it out and bring in Rogov's final Pokemon for this match, and that will be the Ogerpon Cornerstone once again.
Yeah, I mean, not like the greatest situation in the world, but it's a good pivot for Rogov, right? Where get the Ogerpon in now to threaten the opposing Incineroar, who is sort of an important obstacle to remove now with 3 physical attackers remaining. You do not want to keep getting the Intimidate cycled against you. You sort of kind of have maybe Incineroar with the free shot at the opposing Calyrex, but we're going to see a terastallization here perhaps to make this a little bit more complicated.
Yeah, so this is going to be a Fairy-type Calyrex Shadow Rider, so not an offensive terastallization for this Pokemon, rather going to be terastallizing defense. Will not have to worry about taking super effective damage from the opposing knockoff, and still will be able to benefit from a boost to its ghost type attacks thanks to the spell tag it's holding, but also thanks to that nasty plot. That is a +2 special attack boost, and that is going to do, well, a little bit less damage with the parting shot, but still that is a very scary Calyrex Shadow Rider.
Yeah, I guess the good news now is you can fake it out, which I think, and Rogov knew that was happening, right? So we saw the fake out into that slot. Next turn just got it. Turn too soon, but this is a tricky position where even with one level of boosted special attack, it's going to be a little difficult to take this Pokemon out. Now able to protect perhaps the next turn, allowing James to try to cycle this Incineroar back in and intimidate these Pokemon because with the Grassy Terrain active, there is a lot of damage being threatened the other direction, but we're going to see a lot of pivoting, I feel like, over the course of the next several turns, except one side is a restricted Pokemon and the other does not.
I was going to say, one side has a restricted Pokemon, the other one has your best friend Ogerpon doing their best to make an impact in this battle, as I think that Rock-type Ivy Cudgel really is Rogov's best attacking option moving forwards. We see the Incineroars do a little bit of a switcheroo here, and we will get to see James's final, or no, we don't, because it's just Mian Xiao again. And that Pokemon is going to be able to take an attack much more comfortably, I think, and in the sense that it's done its job. It's got the KO against the Terapagos, and now it's able to get knocked out, so that Incineroar can come back in and intimidate once again.
The good news is at least finally we're getting his revenge on that Mian Xiao rather, but yeah, I agree. It's very likely to be another easy Intimidate swap in, both sides potentially threatening a fake out on the next turn, and a very great game by James, where
Yeah.
I think Ragav has done a good job of playing from behind, but this is such a difficult matchup to begin with, and then also having fewer tools. I think if James just goes through and tries not to take too many risks, it's going to be a tough one to close out. The one thing to keep in mind, however, is even with all these Intimidates being cycled, Ograpon's Ivy Cudgel does have an increased critical hit rate, and critical hits ignore these attack drops. So, hey, you know, maybe if Ragav gets a little bit lucky, something interesting could still happen here.
I was going to say, I mean, with the grassy terrain reactivating the sturdy ability, so it's not like you have to worry about that little bit of chip damage from being faked out. You're able to hit these Pokemon with a good amount of damage, especially if that critical hit does come through. I don't think it's over for Ragav, but you're absolutely right. You know, they need to keep working on the positioning. They need to be able to find these opportunities for big damage. And with a flinch into that Calyrex Shadow Rider and an Ivy Cudgel, here's that first shot. Unfortunately, though, it does fall short of doing significant damage.
Yeah, no critical hit in that one. That does make this much trickier, too. Again, kind of a nice timing for Ragav. We're likely going to want to bring Rillaboom back in on exactly the turn where this grassy terrain expired, but in exchange for that, potentially a lot of damage coming his direction. Maybe having to switch into both an attack from this Calyrex and from this Urshifu, who could be threatening a whole lot of damage into either of these slots. Neither of these Pokemon going to be looking very healthy if they get hit with a combination of an Astral Barrage or just a Surging Strike from this Urshifu.
I mean, the nice thing is that this Urshifu is holding Choice Scarf, so without Mystic Water and without the Water-type Terastallization available to it, it is possible for Cornerstone Ogerpon to take Surging Strikes, depending on how it's trained. That being said, though, I like the switch into the Rillaboom here by Ragav, because not only do you get to reset terrain, it's going to take those Water-type attacks so much more comfortably.
Yeah. Perhaps we could see a U-turn as well back into that Intimidate if James want to play really conservatively, which would be punishing here. But we do see the Surging Strikes, so this Rillaboom's going to take this like a champ, barely feeling it at all.
Yeah, and that's the nice thing about Rillaboom, especially on these bulkier teams. You know, with 60% of the field using those Urshifu Rapid Strikes, you're being able to just absolutely mitigate that damage, and that's going to be so important. But with a follow-up Astral Barrage from this Calyrex Shadow Rider, the Rillaboom is still able to hold on, and now a parting shot into that Pokemon ensures that its special attack is, I think, back down to neutral.
Correct, yeah. So, hey, you know, at least you've survived the nasty plot, but that's a lot of important damage in this Rillaboom.
Yeah.
Now in a position where if it uses Wood Hammer pretty much at anything, it's going to knock itself out. Fortunately, there's some, for now, pretty good Grassy Glide targets, although now in one of these tricky spots, right? Well, you kind of want to fake out both of these Pokemon, so what do you want to do? And even with as well as Rillaboom took that previous Surging Strikes, another would knock it out. So James close to closing this one out, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see Incineroar one more time to try to make this a little bit safer.
I was going to say, I don't think you can leave Choice Scarf or Shifu on the field knowing that you're locked into Surging Strikes when there's a Rillaboom who, faking out the Calyrex would be great, but also Grassy's Glide into that Pokemon is usually a knockout if it's not intimidated yet, and that's exactly what we see James play around. You know, you get the Intimidate back out onto the field, you protect the Calyrex, but there is no fake out. Ivy Cudgel into that Incineroar is super effective, and U-turn now as well. This is truly a revolving door of Pokemon here, as both of these trainers are just fighting to get that slight advantage to win. And the fact that Ragav is still hanging on all of these turns later is truly an accomplishment.
I was going to say this. I think this is a really admirable performance from Ragav from behind here. It would have been so easy just to lock in a forfeit after that first turn, but he's really making James earn that one. That's a great turn. Read it exactly correctly, get everything he could out of it. Still threatening a fake out of his own now, which I think a fake out of that last turn in the Protect would basically have been game ending. It's still tough to see the way he pulls it back, but you know, from a health perspective, we're basically even now, even though I think James's position is still significantly better.
Yeah, so the nice thing is that Ogerpon does have the Sturdy ability activated once again. Yes, these two Pokemon, the two Incineroar, have Fake Out available to them, so you can like trade Fake Outs here. That will burn another turn of Grassy Terrain, which would not be great, but then Ogerpon could potentially get one turn of damage in. Fake Out into that Ogerpon, though, means that Sturdy's broken. It will not be doing damage this turn, and now Astral Barrage from that Calyrex Shadow Rider is not enough to pick up the KO. So it looks like Ogerpon's going to hang around for a bit longer, but at the same time, it might still be within range of damage or KO there.
Definitely, and we will see one more parting shot for Rillaboom to get back out in the field here and again threaten a fake out. Calyrex now at a reduced level of special attack, all the way from +2 down to -1, but I think Ragav's starting to get to the point where he's running out of switches. Calyrex threatening a knockback either direction, and one thing we have not pointed out that I think is very critical in this matchup is the Incineroar moveset for Ragav's side. Critically does not have Flare Blitz, right? If you're kind of wondering, like, oh, why isn't it just attacking the Calyrex? That Fairy Terastallization is doing such a good job of protecting it from the Incineroar. And for the two grass-type Pokemon, they're being threatened by so much potential damage from the Calyrex, it's just never been safe for them to use an attack.
For sure, and I think the other thing you have to keep in mind as well is that with the health so low on Rogov's side of the field, yeah, these parting shots are important for the fact that you get to pivot, but I don't think the attack drops really matter anymore, as, Ogerpon isn't necessarily the bulkiest Pokemon. It's probably going to go down to another Astral Barrage. Rillaboom is holding Assault Vest, but again, it's in the red. Just how much more attack can it take? We get a fake out flinch into the Calyrex. Here comes that Ivy Cudgel. No critical hit, which means no knockout there. Knockoff will be able to pick up the KO onto the Rillaboom, and I think that is the last domino falling here for James to take a solid advantage in this matchup.
Yeah, I can't believe how close this one has been, where if that Ogerpon had a critical hit there, things could have been a little bit interesting in the close of this one, but looks like with the Incineroar entering battle and James now taking a 3-2 advantage, the clock could be just about ready to hit midnight for Ragav.
Yeah, James, I think, has to protect the Calyrex Shadow Rider this turn, but at this point in time, really, you just let the Urshifu show up eventually. Maybe you pivot, maybe you don't. Then that's really game, unfortunately. Like we mentioned earlier, Rogov did an absolutely incredible job of keeping the dream alive, but James able to power through and move on here into top 8 at the Vancouver Regional Championships.
Yeah.